This is the Cloud Council. We're joined by Finn Golding and Hayden Shaughnessy. They are the authors of Transformation Sprint. We've previously been talking about their experience and how you implement this kind of a process into your business. But I suppose I'm going to start by saying, why is it that some businesses don't already adopt this kind of strategy? Hayden, is that one for you?
Yeah, well, that's a difficult one because I think that what they tend to do is use old-fashioned tools or traditional tools of project planning, project management. They also are natural hunters, so they go seeking a budget or hunting budget down. They do what they've always done in terms of presenting large budget programs to the board. And actually what also happens in that process, Finn mentioned in program one, that a lot of that takes time. It can take 12 to 18 months. Very often people feel like they've achieved all they want to achieve by the time they start. It's been so much misery, or well, not so much misery is the wrong word, didn't mean to use it, but so much effort that actually when you get to day one, you think, phew, we did it. Now starts the dysfunction. So I think it's really to do with traditions. You know, people are in that tradition. We have to break them out of it.
I mean, have you found, Finn, that the startup mindset is very different because of maybe being built on a native cloud mindset versus these kind of legacy businesses who are trying to manage the depreciation of their existing infrastructure, and therefore they just go, oh, I can't do it.
Yeah, I mean that's probably what it is. I mean, we find that that the traditional, we call them heritage systems, not legacy, but they've been around for a long time. They've got a lot of value in them, but some of them have been around too long, and some have been offshored, shall we say. So all the knowledge is not there to be able to maintain these systems, to bring them up to date. In fact, what happens is that IT themselves don't get a chance to do any refactoring and mentoring of those systems. So what happens is, you know, when you have the startup mindset and you've got technology that can move at a faster pace, and for that we do mean cloud and we mean microservices and all these things, which generally comes from the startups or from a greenfield, should we say. But when you have that, you are able to see the changes in market, changes in customer behavior almost immediately. So at lastminute.com, we would review every day, 3 or 4 times a day, how our business was going, how we were acquiring customers, how many transactions were successful, which pages were not being visited, which ones were being visited. We were tweaking the system like all the time and then delivering to that need. And the same at Paddy Power. So it would be like getting these releases out there. As Hayden says, we prefer to call them changes because they're quite small. 50 releases a day sounds quite impressive, but in fact, you only need to make small changes to then drive behavior in a different way. And large systems tend to come with large processes. I didn't want to say bureaucratic, but traditional processes, where it can take 3 or 4 weeks before that functionality is delivered. And cloud breaks all that away, and some of this new technology breaks it all away, but we tend to be locked onto the older systems, and they become the lowest common denominator, in fact.
And it's not just the tradition in the megabytes, but the mega egos, I guess, at bigger organizations when they want, not necessarily board meetings, Hayden, but you've explained in the past how the culture shift is needed, the human interaction change is needed in order to benefit the business. This is not just programming and coding.
Well, I think we can just talk maybe a bit later on about some of the techniques we use to shift culture, very visual techniques. But if you look at society in general right now, Black Lives Matter, you could say, came out of nowhere. It's actually come out of 50, 60 years of conflict. But as a movement, it came very quickly. And Me Too also came very quickly. So actually changes in culture are suddenly center stage, but they're also very dramatic. Some businesses learn from that, or some businesses even got there earlier. If you look at the way technology has affected customer relationships over time, as an example, there was a wonderful interplay between those two, software as a service, for example, and subscription revenues. Look at all the companies that are moving towards subscription revenues. What people don't understand about these things is that even something as simple or as anodyne as a subscription revenue changes your relationship with customers everywhere, because suddenly they're not people that you've sold something to for a profit and can walk away from. You are now in those customers' lives at least once a month, if not much more often. Your obligation to them increases, how you treat them matters more, how they judge you changes as well. So you can talk about all the egos that go into boardroom decision-making or executive decision-making, but actually what everybody needs to do is to start thinking, what's changed in my customer base? What's changed in the culture of the society that I serve? Because it's profound. And if you don't take account of it, you're going to be planning the wrong transformation.
I mean, does this lead to the problems that you identify as part of your step-by-step analysis? So I know in a previous episode you mentioned, let's call them familiar as opposed to common problems. And there are 18 to 25 that through your analysis and assessment of the business, you highlight, this company is experiencing this problem. And maybe can you identify a few of the key ones there that people can relate to? And is there a way of, I wouldn't say a quick fix, I don't believe that you're pushing that forward as an idea, but more, how can one start adapting to change those key problems?
People change those key problems through the transformation sprint and through the Lighthouse project. So you have to get to the end of that process, which is only 4 weeks long. So it's not like you're waiting around. But the kinds of problems that we would draw attention to, or that we see all the time, would be things like customer centricity. That, in a sense, what a company does when it calls itself customer centric is just rebadges itself. It doesn't do anything new. What you also find with companies is that the business IT divide is absolutely endemic. I don't know, should it be pandemic? What's the right term? It's everywhere, and it's not being resolved, not being addressed. As Finn mentioned, those heritage systems. Finn, what was the oldest one you've come across?
Yeah, well, that would be going back to 1970. So, and still in play today, running quite major system for a large organization. I can't say who it is, but they are quite long in the tooth, some of those things. And what we find is that when we look at the IT architecture and IT strategy, and then we look at where the business is going, we see there's a disconnect. Quite often the IT stuff is talking about, the issues in keeping the lights on and maintaining resources, etc. And the business are talking about growing the business, but they don't seem to connect together. And that's a common thing that we see quite often.
I mean, how do people overcome these? Obviously, there's a 4-week program, but is this, I mean, when they go straight in and identify a problem such as that, is there even a way of addressing it without saying, this is a root and branch change of the organization?
Yeah, that's the key thing, because we talk about core platforms, and the core platform of your organization, everybody has them. That would be managing your customer accounts, or it's the customer facing systems that you have. Then there are other systems as well which are not core, and we show these core systems can be, as I say, maybe they're being managed by a third party, so the actual ability to change it at pace is very low. It's running on old technology, so that also slows it down. And then they do get worried about doing a platform transformation because that's a big change, and they fail just as much. But if you take the sprint approach and say, we're going to take one product, and we're going to take it out of the old platform, we're going to build something brand new, a steel thread, some people call it, from front to back, a brand new product. And all of that technology is going to be new. And then we'll start to decommission the old platform as we move products across. And we did that at Paddy Power. It takes a time. But it takes a brave CIO to go on that journey. And we find that quite a number of CIOs, CTOs, even CEOs are not brave enough to make that play, because they're looking potentially at, well, that might affect my bonus, or, I'm going to be retiring in 2 years' time, so I don't really need that risk or that headache. But we call it out. But we also say, look, take a step towards it. Don't do the big bang. The big bang is always a failure.
So the disconnect, ironically, seems to be humans.
It's humans. Well, I'll let Hayden chat about this as well, but it's humans, it's silos, it's hierarchies. What else, Hayden?
So I think that there are those disconnects. I think that the biggest disconnect actually is between companies and the marketplace. What most companies that we come across don't seem to understand is how much the market is changing. And it seems to be that that's something that's almost like an afterthought. Companies these days don't do very good, very progressive strategy. Let me give you an example, though. I'll see if I can drag an example up of what I mean. if you look at the success of a company like Amazon, what's it based on really? And it has the systems, it has the people, it has some bad management practices, but you could probably say that it's gone in 3 phases. The first one was, let's give customers selection. Let's give customers the biggest possible catalog. And then it would be, right, let's give customers the lowest possible price. And now it's, let's give customers the information they need to make the best purchasing decisions. And that's probably over a 15-year period, 3 mantras. And each one of them has changed how business in general has to function because of Amazon's position. But other companies could do that as well. They could have a very simple thing which says, we want to make more this easier, higher quality, or better price, lower priced, so that customers can do this more effectively. And that's what we don't find in many companies. It's that so customers can do this part of the equation. That's the relationship breakdown, I think. It's between company and customer.
Wow. So going through the transformation sprint process will actually accelerate people's identifying of these issues in the first place anyway. We're going to start, Hayden Shaughnessy, with a tech talk. I'd like to know what app you can't live without and why.
I actually don't like apps that much. I'm pretty old-fashioned. I like machines, so I have a great Fujifilm camera, and that's something I carry around with me a lot.
So do you remember the first piece of cameraware you bought, and did you have to maybe save up for it as a child? And how old is it, and do you still have it?
I don't still have it, but I used to have, it was actually, I think, a Pentax SLR in the non-digital world. And I had that in my 20s and used to do a lot of landscapes with it. And then gave up on photography completely and didn't pick a camera up again until about 3 years ago.
3 years ago. So we might go a bit more into that later. But the most expensive tech toy you have ever bought might be to do with photography, and was it worth it?
It's a tough call, actually. It's between this iMac that I'm talking to you on and this printer that I used to print my photography. So I have buyer's remorse with both. Do you want to talk about that?
Were they worth it?
Absolutely worth every penny.
Fantastic. Leave those reviews. 5 stars. Thank you for your tech talk, Hayden Shaughnessy. Finn Golding, this is your tech talk. What app can you not live without and why?
It's a good question. I'm a bit like Hayden. I don't use social apps anymore. I've kind of moved them off my main screen. So I use Reverb, which is basically the eBay for musicians. So I can't live without it, but I should because I buy too many things through it. So
which I suppose leads on a bit of a twist. The most recent thing you bought from Reverb.
The most recent thing I bought, oh God, I wish I hadn't asked me that. It's a Charvel, actually no, it's not. It's a Jackson Soloist SL2H with those pointy headed guitars from the 80s. I always wanted one, so I got one in green. It's about 2005, I think, but my wife hates it.
But you love it. That's the most important thing. And do you remember your first ever piece of proper technology? The piece you picked up and you went, this is what I've saved up for.
The first bit of technology I bought, which I still have, is a Sinclair ZX80, the very first home PC, not the ZX81. The ZX80 was white. You had to put it together yourself. The ZX81 was a bit more expensive because it was already put together. And it's kind of what got me into computing, really. So,
does it still work?
It does, yeah. It's hard to find old TVs to see it actually on, but it does still work. And it's kind of like a great memory for me because back in the day, there wasn't such a thing as, computer science degrees, etc. That was learning on the job.
That was your way in, your gateway computer. And just finally, the most expensive tech toy you've ever bought, and was it worth it?
I don't know. I bought so many laptops and machines over the previous years. I'd say the iPad Pro is a recent one, which is expensive, but really worth it.
Fantastic. That was your tech talk, Finn. Just to start wrapping up, and you talk about mantras of businesses, there's some great lines in the book about transformation as a permanent state. I love the one about stop starting and start finishing. I'm not sure which one of you is going to claim credit for
I think
that.
Yeah, I've said it. I'm sure I got it from somebody else, but
It's yours. It's yours. It's in print now. In terms of moving forward, we have in the past looked chronologically at where we might have come from technologically. I think with both of you and your intellect and viewpoint, it's worth maybe trying to help business IT leaders sleep better at night. What do they need to know moving forward? What do you see on the horizon that they can maybe adapt, adopt, or tackle before it becomes too late?
Well, I think where I would start is that, next year is going to be the year of transformation. We know that. We know that companies will need to pivot potentially from their current business model. They may actually have to create something brand new, and other pandemics might come or other big events might come. So there's been a bit of a wake-up call for organizations and how they've underinvested in technology, underinvested in their people, etc. So we think what we talk about sounds like we call out all of the bad things, but it is fun doing this. We do have a fun side to this, which is that we find that in organizations, when we get them to work together socially, we call this collective intelligence. We've got great social interaction. We get people visualizing, we get people drawing, we get all these things. There's an energy that comes from that where you can therefore tackle anything if you put your mind to it. You're breaking down some of those barriers, and we have to call out some of the bad behaviors. I mean, that's equally part of this. In fact, one of the things that we used to do previously was actually get developers to put code actually into their code, whether the code was being used or not, to show product people your application only 20% is being used. You're asking us to build things we don't need, and sometimes you have to show it to them. You have to show what the issues are before you can then move on. To Hayden's point earlier, a little bit of therapy helps. 2021 will be the year of transformation, believe it or not. What do you think, Hayden?
So I think that many of the things that we experience in all areas of life are on a pendulum. They swing this way and then they swing back. And it used to be 1980s, 1990s, operating model transformation, business process re-engineering, global supply chains. It swung to business model innovation, value proposition development. It's swinging back to the operating model. Unfortunately, we don't have enough learnings around that, because when we were doing BPR, we'd just come off the back of a lot of operating model work from people like Michael Porter and the guys that did the BPR books. So take Transformation Sprint as something which is teaching you about the operating model and about the generative nature of operating models. You don't need a fixed model to go to. You need a way to learn about the types of operating model changes that you need to make going forward. If you can get hold of that idea, then I think it all becomes much, much simpler than it would be otherwise.
Fantastic. Well, gentlemen, I think that's a perfect place to leave it. Although it sounds a little bit TV chat show, the book, obviously, Transformation Sprint, people can find that on all the right platforms. And the Flow Academy, that's where people can actually engage you guys and really get to the bottom of some of these issues. Is that right?
With flowacademy.io is our website, but we're also there on LinkedIn if anybody wants to connect with us. And we have a very special offer that we normally have for new clients, is that the first conversation, you just have to buy us a beer, a craft beer, and we'll have a chat with you about any issue whatsoever. And it's good fun for us to share our experience and to learn, as well as help customers as well.
Fantastic. I hope you have a substantial meal with that craft beer. Quinn Golding, Hayden Shaughnessy, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here on the Cloud Council. I hope you guys have enjoyed it as much as we have. You know exactly where to click if you'd like to find out more, but this is where business IT leaders can learn a lot more from people who have been there and done that, and you two certainly have proven that maxim to be true. We'll see you again. Until then, take care. Thank you.